So what we're going to do now is just really confuse you. We are going to get into some of the terms and of the technology that we're using. For those folks that are service providers that are now exiting the room, I say, who know all the lingo that there is to know, please make sure you take an extra lunch with you. We still have several boxes of them there, and that goes for everybody. If you want to take an extra lunch so you don't have to cook dinner, please do so. Hilda's also holding up the certificates. So if you signed up to receive a certificate, please make sure you pick it up on your way out, okay? And again, if you did not sign up, but you still would like to have one so you can get those continuing education credits, just let Gretchen, who's waving her hand back there, know, and she's got some blanks, and she'll be glad to help you out with that. So with regard to the broadband terms that we're going to be hitting you with, from the first session, from 101, we started off very simple. We tried to get into, what a bit was, what a byte was, what's the difference between speed and capacity, and why you should care. We also talked about upload speeds, download speeds, so hopefully everybody's got a good baseline on all that. If you do not, one thing I want to remind you of is that all these sessions, not only today, but the ones that we had back in Somerset a couple of months ago and the upcoming event November 14th in Hazard, Wes Brown back there, our videographer par excellence, is recording all these. And we've put them on a private YouTube channel. So any of these sessions that you want to share with people when you get back to your community, or you just need to, do some review of, they'll be online, available at the Center for Rural Development's website. And we can also send you a link if you would like. So the categories that we've chosen for today are engineering, construction, network management, and then just some general industry terms.
So the way we're going to do this is we're going to sort of throw out a couple of terms and let you all sort of shout out an answer before we actually show it. And the first one that, as an example, is probably something that Mike Hayden would really want everybody to know about when it comes up. And that is ROW. Anybody understand what ROW is? Right of way. That's good. So that's the very first one. Right of way is and another term, of course, is easements. So as you understand and heard from Mike, I don't think we really have to go over that again.
No, just understand that right of way is a requirement for stringing up fiber. Who knew? So, make sure that, this goes into your plan, okay?
OSP, outside plant. That is the elements that the construction of the poles and the fibers and all the electronics that are on the outside plant, or on the fiber itself, on the poles. FTTH or FTTP, fiber to the home or fiber to the premise. So in other words,
that's pretty good.
Yep. So these are things that you'll need to know if you're wanted to have conversations as you're dealing with the consultants and engineers. These are there's another term called FTTX, which means basically any way of getting fiber to the curb, the network, the node, the home, the premise, all that. Anybody know what pole attachment means?
You better. They're going to cost you $15 a month.
Bob, shout it out. Yep, joint use. So the pole attachment. Is AEP hard to have pole attachment agreements with? Is AEP hard to have old pole attachment agreements with? All right, just checking. Bob works for Kentucky Power.
Well, once you do finally get a pole attach agreement, and it's very important, there's a cost associated to this. It can be a lump sum payment that you would have to make, if you're working with a single pole owner for your entire community, or it could be spread across. We're working, as Mike said, with 70 pole owners throughout the entire Commonwealth. So that's 70 separate agreements, 70 separate negotiations, 70 separate sets of lawyers to put the agreements together. So it takes a lot of time. And then the cost associated with it, as Darrell's got up here, can, he's got $10 to $25 annually per pole, and we've actually seen it as high as $35 in the Commonwealth. So, you take the number of poles you've got and multiply it by that number annually, that can get into more money than you might want to step into.
Yep. Make ready. This is what AEP charges for stuff. Make ready. And that is what you see up there. And I'm going to actually show you some examples of very busy make ready. As you see, that pole is pretty busy. It's got a lot of stuff on it. How much would you charge for that, Bob, to change that out?
Which one, the next slide? That one.
A lot. How about that one? That's pretty clean. So, whoops. Oh, you didn't.
I got it.
Oh, you got the clicker. I've changed mine.
The next one or the previous?
This one. Next one now.
The next one?
Yeah. There you go. That one's pretty clean.
And so, when you're looking at your community, and this is one of the things, I talked about my ignorance, some of these poles have to be completely replaced, and some of them, there's just no solution. You just can't go that way. Even though the route is where you want to run your fiber, the poles may be of such height and such capacity already that there's just not room for another provider to go on it. And then you have to back up and look for an alternate route or another way of stringing that fiber.
The next term, symmetrical broadband service. Anybody know what symmetrical means? Yep. And this is important because I think Kevin alluded to it earlier in his presentation. So if you had a 6-lane expressway coming into your community, it would be pretty easy for people to get into you. That's the download, like delivering Netflix. But if you have a single-lane dirt road getting out, that's like the upload speed. And if you didn't have the same upload speed 6 lanes out and you had a dirt road instead, it would be pretty difficult to do business sharing your assets going out of town. So that's why symmetrical is very important. So if somebody tells you that they've got 50 meg service, you got to be sure, is it 50 meg by 3 or is it 50 meg by 50 meg? That's one of the good things about fiber. It is symmetrical.
Yeah, and you're probably getting a lot of this from the business community because that's kind of one of the gripes that that we have in economic development, is that we've got a lot of companies that come and say, well, the provider said he can put a 50 meg pipe in. I've got 2 servers here and I'm selling stuff over the internet, and come to find out it's 50 down and 2 up. I can't sell my product. My customers can't load my pictures because it just takes way too long to get the images from my location up to the internet.
And the digital work-at-home jobs are in the same shape. Some of the Amazons and IBM won't hire you if you don't have good upload speeds.
Right, yeah, dedicated. So, when everybody comes home from school, does your internet service drop from a 60 by 6 down to a 3 by 1?
Yes. Knock, and not like knock on wood, but NOC, knock. Network Operations Center. There you go. Network Operations Center is really the heartbeat of your system in the community. It controls all your network, and it houses the computers and the electronics to control it.
And so if you're putting in a fiber network in your community, you're going to have to learn what a NOC is, what it does, and how to build one, because you're going to need it.
GPON. That's a gigabit passive optic network. Now,
I think you stumped him on that one.
Yeah, I understand why it is a hard one and hasn't been said a lot, but as you're constructing, it's the electronics that goes out on the pole as the distribution in the community, and it's important because it shares the fiber easier, and it's non-powered, so it doesn't cost as much to deliver the service out in the community. So if you want to make an affordable fiber system, you will probably be looking at a GPON system.
And this is probably the technology most used to service homes and apartments and schools.
We've talked a little bit about some of this with Mike Hayden's presentation, but backbone or middle mile, have you heard of that? And what is that? Kentucky Wired? So basically, it's really all of the networks throughout the nation combined that actually distributes through all of the major hubs and centers. And then they collectively even get into the state level that has a next level of it. So there's like a tier 1 and a tier 2 backbone or middle mile.
Yeah, so essentially a middle mile is carrying your data across a long distance without interruption. That's probably one of the more layman ways to put it. It's connecting your last mile network over to the national grid, if you will.
It's a little bit like the interstate highway system. It connects all of the major states and major cities, and then you have branches off of it. So the interstate highway is more your backbone, and the other one is your middle mile. I lost my place there. Last mile, we've heard that all day long. Last mile is Hilda. Coming from Hilda, of course, talking about expensive, right? Okay. Yes. So we use that as the last piece of delivery. And that actually can be 2 or 3 different things. Fiber is a part of it, but fixed wireless can also be a component of delivering the last mile. Not necessarily your ultimate solution, but it can be an interim product because it does do a good job of getting you there inexpensively.
Yeah, and again, last mile connects into the middle mile. Knee bone connected to the shin bone. The last mile can be a community of 5 people, or it can be 5 counties. So you can actually have a last mile solution that surrounds 5 counties that then connects into a middle mile solution to backhaul that data up to the tier 1 providers.
Correct. So we have the backbone or middle mile and the last mile. Now we have the backhaul, I said that wrong. The backbone, yes I did, backbone, middle mile, and the last mile. Now we have the backhaul and gateway. Does anybody tell me what that is?
The backhaul for redundancy to keep it going, and is that kind of what it is? So that you've got a backup plan, so to speak, no?
No. It is actually the connectivity between the middle mile and the last mile. In other words, to get your broadband actual uploads and your downloads and your actual, it's like your last mile and your middle mile is the fiber itself, just like your electric poles have the copper wires on it, but then you have electricity on it. So if you want the internet on the fiber, you have to have that connectivity for the actual, to get your last mile to that source. It lights it up. So that's your gateway services. So if you have a last mile fiber system in place, you still have to have connectivity between that and the gateway, which gives you a gateway and a broadband, the actual internet itself.
Yeah, you actually have to backhaul across your backbone. Anybody's mind blow yet?
So there are several different players involved across the nation with broadband in the telecom industry. And one of the groups are ILECs. Anybody know what ILEC is? They are the incumbent local exchange carriers. So that's your traditional AT&Ts, Windstreams, and they were really enacted back in the early 30s, but continued on with the 1996 Act. The next group is RLECs. That is the rural local exchange carriers, and we had several in here earlier. Intermountain Cable, or not Intermountain Cable, Coalfields, Mountain Rural, and TDS, and some of those. That would be the rural local exchange carriers. And this is important to understand because as you have heard earlier about the opportunities that these people are doing with fiber and stuff in their neck of the woods, they're not necessarily a competitive company and that would move into another area as a co-op or as an incumbent, because the rural carriers and the incumbent carriers were assigned those territories specifically. So that can't be changed. So if somebody moves into those territories, they are called CLECs. Anybody know what a CLEC is? That's the competitive local exchange carrier. So we have a rural LEC, a rural local exchange carrier, RLEC, which is People's Rural Telephone. Keith was here a little earlier, and they are looking to provide service in another area, in the London area, but they will not be going there as a co-op. They'll be going there as a competitive local exchange carrier. So as you're looking for partners, you got to understand the dynamics sometimes of the different telcos and what they can or cannot do. So that's why it's sort of important to understand when you're talking to an ILEC or an RLEC or a CLEC.
And Darrell, I'm sure there's a particular form the FCC fills out for each one of these, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, Mike. There you go.
Did everybody hear that? That's important. Let me take the mic over there.
Yeah.
Lessons learned. Again, lessons learned as we went after trying to attach to those 82,000 poles or 85,000 with 70 different agreements. We found with many that we had to become a CLEC legally in order to be able to attach to their poles. There was no regulatory mandate otherwise that said that they had to do anything. And most of them kind of held to that line to say that, no, I have no obligation from a legal perspective that allows you to attach to those poles. As local communities, you may have other opportunities to gain that access via franchise or whatever it may be that you may be able to negotiate. But for our purposes, we had to become a statewide CLEC of which to gain access to those agreements that we didn't get with third-party partners and other negotiations. So just another warning tip there. Do we have any issues with the former GTE territory relative to, from a regulatory vantage point? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was 286 days of negotiation.
So
1 or 2 days.
So in addition to the ILECs, the RLECs, and the CLECs, who have been around for a while and competing against each other, especially since the 1996 Acts, we have a new term, and we have been talking it today, and a lot of you here are really looking from this perspective, and that's the MUNI. And basically, that's the municipal network operator that wants to give an alternative and have more control on the affordability and broadband access. Next term, CPE. customer premise equipment. So that's actually the term that is used for the equipment inside your house once you get broadband, fiber, or fixed wireless attached to the side of your house. Then you need this piece of equipment to actually deliver it to the rest of your house, whether it's over Wi-Fi or whether it's to your computers.
And folks, this is another cost center for you. So, you know, if you're looking at being your own provider, somebody's got to buy this piece of gear and put it in the home. You know, that can be you supplying it for free like Charter does with my service. Or it can be a rental fee, like Windstream was doing to me for a while there. Not in good condition. No, you won't get them back.
This is a newer term, but it's probably going to permeate everybody's life in the future here. IOE. Now, some of you may have heard of that formerly named IoT, but now it is IOE. Internet of everything, everything. That's what we are migrating to in the industry, is we're moving to this idea that the internet, the broadband, will actually touch everything at some level, whether it's a refrigerator, whether it's RFID chips in a guy's arm going to work. I heard that on the news about a month ago. I'm sure that's considered an IOE. So it is going to be, it'll permeate all discussions really as far as the end user of broadband.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, they've even got implants in cows right now. Anybody got them yet? Seriously. And, you know, agriculture is one of those areas, and we are a lot of agricultural communities. You're going to be seeing a lot of these monitors and devices and RFID chips being put all kinds of places that you never expect them to go. And those devices are going to have to connect into a reader at some point, and that reader is going to have to connect into the internet at some point.
Right.
So you might be running a line to the back 40, folks.
Larry, what they do is they know that a cow goes and eats, she starts to walk around more, and they have sensors that they put around the band of the cow. When she starts to move faster, you know it's time to get out the IA and get her ready to come.
I love it. I love that,
You,
Sandy.
you, win,
Yes.
you win some kind of prize.
Yeah. That
Go,
was
go to the
great.
table, help yourself.
That's great. Sandy, you sound like a real cowgirl there. All right, so this last one will segue into our next session, and there's two acronyms, but they pretty much mean the same thing. One is LBB, and the other is LFA. Anybody know what those are? Hilda, do you know? Go ahead. Yes, local fiber authority or local broadband board, which is something that every community needs to start out first and foremost before you even think about anything else. Very good. Thank you.
So give yourself an A.